All right, I'm going to give you 15 reasons why you might choose a revolver over a semi-automatic. I get a lot of comments about my choice of a revolver, that I would actually use a revolver, and I get a lot of comments that I'm pretty much foolish for not using a semi-automatic, and I get a lot of reasons why. It mostly has to do with capacity, but I'm going to give you my list of 15 reasons why you would want to use a revolver. And before I get into that, let me give a little bit of a backstory about my experience and the reasons why I do choose revolvers sometimes over semi-automatics, and it has a lot to do with experience. So my experience has been that I grew up out in a rural area, and pretty much this whole area, there's not really a lot around me. There's hills all over here. It's actually a flat area, but because there's a river over here, there's a big old hill. So this always gave me the ability, even as a teenager, 25 years ago, to come out and just kind of shoot however I wanted to. It didn't really matter the trajectory of the rounds. I could be, shoot however I wanted to shoot, just kind of all over the place here. And I did mostly rifles and shotguns and stuff like that. And then as an adult, I got into handguns, and I came back out to this area to shoot. And pretty much my way of doing things would be to get a particular firearm. I never had a dog in this fight. I never came out and said, I want to get a revolver versus an auto. When I started doing handguns about 15 years ago, I pretty much got into, get something that sounds like it might be right for me and try it out. And here I am about 40 handguns later, still trying stuff out, and I have gained a lot of knowledge, and a lot of knowledge based on stuff that I can do that you can't necessarily do at a gun range. Shoot however I want, any angle I want, as fast as I want, all of that. So my issue with semi-automatic, here is an LCP pistol 380, and this is the perfect gun to explain this. The type of grip I use is a thumbs over grip, and the reason why I do that is just simply the way my hands are. If I try to do one of these types of grips, you can see how this might be a problem for someone like me. And even with a little bit larger pistols, it becomes a little bit of an issue. So I found through experimentation, what works for me for pretty much any gun of any size is to just kind of put my other thumb over here in some way. I did start out shooting revolvers like this, and I could actually shoot semi-automatics like that fine, but overall it's probably not the best idea. So I kind of just switched it over to something like this or like this, and it depends on the firearm size. So that's just a quick backstory of why I hold guns the way I do, and why I'm not necessarily looking at one particular platform as better than the other. I shoot both, and I never came at this as, oh, revolvers are better. But a lot of people on my channel years ago, they'd be like, wow, you're one of the only guys that shoots revolvers. You're only one of the only guys that brings out revolvers. You're the revolver guy. You're the revolver guy. And I never thought of myself that way. But because people kept saying that, I kind of changed my name to Revolver Aficionado, just to help people kind of find revolver content. But I really wasn't aware that it wasn't out there. So enough of that. That's my backstory. Let me give the 15 reasons why someone might carry a revolver. Number one is reliability. Revolvers are simply more reliable, and I'm coming at this from my experience. Tens and tens of thousands of rounds in both. I've never had a revolver fail me other than like a Taurus 22 where the transfer bar snapped. But I prefer Smith & Wesson revolvers that don't have transfer bars. But I've had a lot of semi-automatic malfunctions. Most of them are not user-induced, and some of them are. So they do happen. I've had hundreds of malfunctions with semi-automatics. And while a good semi-automatic can be very reliable, it's typically only reliable when you have something like a full-size pistol that has a little bit of weight behind it, and you use a moderate caliber. In that situation, they can be very reliable. So I'm going to demonstrate not only something to do with reliability, but number two is reliability with bad ammo. And let me explain. When you have a bad round with a semi-automatic, you have to manually clear it. When you have a bad round with a revolver, not so much. So what I have is I have 4 good rounds here of 9mm, and I have one round that is a dummy round that's not going to fire. I'm going to mix these up and put them in my gun. I'm going to use the Taurus G2C. I have no idea, which round is the bad round just from feeling around here. I have my 5 rounds in place. I have no idea which is which. I didn't feel the noses or anything. So, put up my little Taurus G2C and see what happens. Bad round. I'm gonna have to clear it. And that's definitely something that can be done, but let's compare that to the Revolver. All right, I have some rounds here. They're all live rounds except for this one, which is a dummy round. And these are all nickel plated cases, so when I put 6 rounds in here and close it, I'm gonna have no idea which is which for the dummy round. These are all gonna be the same color, so let me spin it. Let's see what happens when I land on this bad round. And we saw there, a bad round, it stays in the chamber, and you just pull the trigger again, and it keeps firing. That's definitely an advantage, especially for someone who's not practicing at clearing malfunctions regularly. Number 3 is also ammo related, and that would be less need to test the ammunition that you're going to carry in that firearm. My experience is tens of thousands of rounds. I've tested so many different defensive rounds of semi-automatic and revolver, and I've never had a round fail to fire other than maybe a dead primer in a revolver, which is, you know, that goes on back to 2 with bad ammo. But I've never had a round that wouldn't fire in a revolver. So you can pretty much go out and you can buy any type of defensive ammo you want. You can put it in that revolver, close it up, and if it's from a reputable company, you know it's going to function. Dozens of times I have taken certain semi-automatic pistols and I have put certain defensive ammo in it, and for one reason or another, from the nose shape or maybe the power level, something about it causes that ammunition to malfunction significantly. And I'm not talking about my Glock conversion where I have issues with that for another reason. I'm talking legitimate firearms that should not malfunction. I've had malfunction with certain ammo. Next reason is power. Revolvers simply are more powerful for the most part. Here's 2 firearms. I have a Smith & Wesson Model 69 and 44 Magnum. I have a Smith & Wesson M&P with a 5-inch barrel. As you can see, these firearms are roughly the same overall size for the most part. And typically you can have revolver rounds like 357 Magnum, in this case 44 Magnum. All kinds of rounds that in a relatively compact gun are very, very powerful. More powerful than pretty much all of your semi-automatic pistols. Now when you get into 10mm, you're kind of at the same power level as 357 Magnum, and you can go up to like 50 Action Express and stuff like that in semi-automatics. But at that point, those handguns are so large and so expensive, they're not really practical in any way, shape, or form. So I'm going to show a difference in power here. I have a couple of water jugs downrange. I'm going to hit them, one with this 9mm and one with the 44 Magnum, and see how they compare. All right, first up, I'm going to hit the water jug on the left with this American Gunner 9mm plus P 124 grain. You know, this is about a 400 foot-pound energy cartridge, but this is pretty much standard for semi-automatics. So let's hit that water jug. And I'll show that real quick because I did a really good job. And it did a lot of damage to that water jug. Now let's try that 44 Magnum, which the firearm is basically the same size. All right, I got some Hornady Custom 240 grain 44 Magnum. These are more than twice the muzzle energy as mine of 9mm. These are about 840 foot-pounds energy, as where the 9mm was about 400. Let's see what this does to a water jug. And it actually had a lot of ice in it, more than the other one, but still, it completely shredded this thing. Very powerful. Next up is your selection and power level choices of ammunition. You don't have that with semi-automatics for the most part. You can have relatively different power levels, but for the most part, you got to stick with the caliber that it's chambered for. With revolvers, that's not the case. We have multiple choices, like in a 357 Magnum revolver. We can also fire 38 Special, and also fire 38 Short Colt. and 38 long Colt. And we have the same thing with 44 Magnum, 44 Special, 44 Russian. Those all fit in the same firearm. And pretty much every revolver, 32, 327, 32 H&R Magnum, 32 long, 32 short, 32 ACP. We have a variety of choices of ammo that we can fire. So I'm going to fire 3 different power levels from the same revolver. 38 short Colt. Here's a 38 Special and a 357 mag. See the difference? A lot of variety for a lot of different people. If you have different people in your house and you want maybe your wife to have a certain load in that gun, she can put 38 Special in it. Or maybe you want 357 Magnum. You know, there's a lot of choices that you have that you don't have with semi-automatic pistols. Next up is your safety. Revolvers are very, very safe because they have such a long, heavy trigger pull. It can be mastered to be fired well, but when we talk about like a semi-automatic, you know, there's a round in this chamber. That's pretty much how you have to carry it to have it ready to go. And I'm going to use the tip of my finger here, just the very tip of it. And I can easily fire that weapon. Now, if I were to come back to a revolver, if I were to try to do that, can't do it. I have to put a little bit more finger on that and get a long, heavy, intentional trigger pull. So the trigger in and of itself is its safety. And because of that, they are very safe to carry in a pocket. Like we have a little 380 here. I don't like to carry this, even though this has a little bit heavier trigger pull. This is clear. Than a typical semi-automatic. It's still relatively light, but I have no problem daily carrying a little pocket snubby because those trigger pulls are much longer and harder to pull accidentally. So very safe to put in a very compact area that you might not want to put a semi-automatic. I mean, if you're putting both on your side here and you have the trigger covered, that's fine. And that's relatively safe, but when we talk about putting it somewhere, like just throwing it in your pocket, would I want, you know, around in the chamber and just toss this in my pocket? No, because you could potentially pull that trigger right through clothing. If the clothing's loose enough, that's not going to happen with a revolver for a couple reasons. One, because the trigger pull is so long, but also when we look at revolvers, if you put any pressure on the side of the cylinder here, like in your pocket in a holster, the cylinder can't rotate. So it's relatively safe to carry in a very concealable place where a semi-automatic might not be. All right, 7 and 8 are going to be 2 different things that are kind of the same thing but a little bit different, and that is going to be firing through a pocket. And when we look at a semi-automatic, what happens if you put it in your pocket and you want to fire this thing? Let's say I need to fire this right now. Ow. I'm burned with brass. This actually fired, but a lot of times if your pocket is a little bit tighter, it's not gonna fire. I'm gonna try to replicate this the best I can. A lot of times if you get like a really tight pocket in a semi-automatic, it won't. Apparently this is blowing through and I can't show. I'm kind of disproving this myth. Well, there was a round kind of stuck in there. It wasn't clearing this chamber. But it is something that has been reported a lot of times where trying to fire through a pocket with certain guns. This gun's got a little bit heavier slide, so it's not going to jam up, but little LCP, I've tried that before and had it jam up. But a revolver, let's try that. I got my little J-frame revolver. Not really an issue at all. You know, I'm kind of showing that both worked, but I'm saying that through my experience, I've done other tests where smaller framed pistols will jam in a pocket. Next thing is going to be our contact shot. This is something that's not really going to come into play for most people, but it's something that might be important for like a rape defense gun. When you push a gun up against the target, it comes out of battery and the gun can't be fired until it's backed off a little bit to go back into battery. And with a revolver, it's a little bit different. With a revolver, it can be fired through a pocket or come right up against something. And you can see how that intensifies that impact of that round. Does a lot of damage. The hot gas really does a lot of damage. So if you're hit with a contact shot, you're going down, even if it's a little 38. All right, number 9 is going to be our carry comfort. This is kind of subjective. I get a lot of people that tell me a semi-automatic is more comfortable to carry than a revolver, but it has been completely the opposite from my experience, because the semi-automatics typically have a little bit of a rough edge right here, kind of a hump, and when you try to carry it high or something like that, it digs in. Now here's a revolver, and I've always noticed that it's comfortable to carry because a lot of times you have your grips that are rounded and rubber, and even if you carry them high, if you bend, you know, you sit in a car or whatever, this doesn't hurt. But the sharp edge of a pistol grip does hurt. You know, that might just be a personal preference there, but that's my experience with that. Number 10 is the ability to customize your grips on a revolver. This particular revolver here, this model's 69 and 44 mag. This is the original grips. It was kind of small, so I decided to put a much larger grip with a lot more padding on it because it's a 44 Magnum. It works really, really well, and I've seen people that really would prefer different grips. I have a girlfriend that's 4'10", 112 pounds. She can't grip normal pistols. And that goes along with reliability as well. She needs to have a smaller grip, kind of like the little compact classic panel grips. And also, when it comes to reliability and the grips on a semi-automatic, let me explain. Little 380 pistol, she can't really hold this. It's too big even for her, but she also cannot rack it. And I know people are gonna say, well, I could teach her to. Well, no, you can't. We've been through this a lot of times. You know, even taking the technique where you take and you push the gun into the slide, it doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. But I've seen her take my 686, load it up with ammo, and shoot it with 357 Magnum, no problem. But she cannot load and rack this 380. It's just not going to happen. So definitely more customization and reliability in general for people with different hand sizes. That was number 11, ease of operation. People that have issues or are small can't operate a revolver no problem. The number 12 is going to be manual of arms. They're going to be the same from firearm to firearm. And what I mean is semi-automatics all can be a little bit different. Their mag release can be a little different, even in different spots. Your safeties, it can have a safety or not, it can be in different spots. But here's two guns. One's a different brand than the other. Smith & Wesson versus a Ruger. Totally different size, but the manual of arms is the same, where you have a cylinder release. You push it or pull it or whatever, it opens, you load, you close, you pull the trigger. Same thing with this Ruger. It has a different way of this working, but it pushes in, you pop it out, you load it, you close it, you shoot it, you pull the trigger. Very simple. The manual of arms is really good to know from, you know, gun to gun, and with a revolver it's the same. All right, next thing with a revolver is the unassuming ready, where you look as if you're not ready for a fight, but you are. And while this can be done with a semi-automatic, most of your semi-automatics that can fit in a pocket are not as ergonomic, so it's kind of hard to get a good grip on them. But if I have this revolver in my pocket here, I could be like this. I look like I'm not ready. I have this 38 in my pocket. That quick. And it's a lot different than having something back here where you have to pull the clothing away and then reach for it. And, you know, it looks like you're drawing a gun. When it's in your pocket like this, completely in your hand with your customized grip that fits your hand, it's in your pocket. It will shoot through a pocket more reliably. It'll have a contact shot more reliably, and it can come out, and you know, you're not going to snag up on something like the slide and have some sort of malfunction. It's going to be just point and shoot. Very important. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is kind of controversial. Accuracy. A lot of people will say, well, they're about the same. And I guess for, your typical combat distance, pretty much your accuracy isn't going to be an issue. But the thing we have to take into consideration is that when we talk about revolver, we're talking about a fixed barrel. And once that cartridge is fired, it's going to go down this barrel and leave it. If you have a fast round like a 357, your recoil is going to happen after the bullet leaves. There's not a lot going on here. And just that fixed barrel does provide a lot of accuracy. And we talk about semi-automatics, it's a little bit different here. You don't have a fixed barrel for the most part, some do, but you have a barrel that's kind of wobbling around a little bit. And it's kind of hard to scientifically say, what can cause it to be not quite as accurate, but I have noticed that the accuracy kind of does suffer a little bit. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to fire from 25 yards. These have about the same amount of barrel travel for the bullets. My 686 with some light 357s, and I got some 9mm target ammo. I'll just see what kind of accuracy we can get at 25 yards. All right, 25 yards from the target. I'm just going to do 12 rounds of each platform center mass. I'm going to try to do a real good job here and place these rounds as accurately as I think that I can. 9mm. All right, I started firing a little bit faster because it looked like I was doing pretty well. I'm gonna go take a look at that and see what I got. And honestly, this is a lot better than what I thought I would have got. That 5-inch pistol is doing excellent for me. One's down a little bit low, but I would say definitely at that distance, this is fine. All right, 357 mag. This is max charge of tight group powder. We're doing about 1,300 feet per second on a 125 grain bullet. I'm just gonna see what I can do double action with this. All right, I'm gonna go up and take a look. All right, so I'm gonna call this about even. Well, we had some really cool looking stuff here where it's a little bit tighter. Our flyer here and our flyer here is about the same distance away from our groups. I had one flyer, well, it's kind of hard to say here, but I'm gonna say that for a practical purpose, no, I don't think necessarily that the revolver is more accurate. It is something that is talked about, and I think if you put it on a rest and you were to shoot at some extreme distances, like a couple hundred yards, I think you definitely would see some advantage with the revolver at that range. But when we look at 25 yards, this is beyond what you're ever gonna fire these guns in self-defense. I'm gonna say they're pretty comparable. So that was 14 reasons. I guess 15 reasons would be, the 15th would be to just have a little common sense here. The argument I get into a lot is something like this. Bro, you only have 6 rounds in that revolver. There's multiple attackers. You can't take down multiple attackers. What if there's 14 people that come at you? You can't do that with 6 rounds. Well, what I'm going to say to that is situational awareness and putting yourself in a situation where you need a lot of rounds is something that the typical person should not be doing. People that do that are doing that on purpose. They need to be there, like law enforcement. When law enforcement officer goes somewhere like that, they have a duty to go into danger and to investigate and all of that. They're going to have high capacity because they need that. The guy that just got out of his concealed carry class is not that police officer. And our statistical data still in 2021 shows that the average shots fired in self-defense are between 1 and 5, with the average being 3. Not 17 plus 1 plus 2 backup magazines. So the thing we have to look at is look at this real world data. And I've actually watched a lot of videos where we see self-defense, and most people are carrying semi-automatics, but typically what you see is they pull up the semi-automatic, 2 shots, the threat has been stopped, and they are done, and they put this gun back in their holster or whatever. And when you look at the fact that some semi-automatics are very unreliable, and some, I mean most small ones, and when you look at that our need is going to be less than a revolver's capacity, typically less than 5, and we know that a revolver is going to put out those 5 rounds very reliably, and we know that a lot of these smaller semi-autos will not, it becomes an obvious choice why you would choose a revolver. Now, when we talk about large guns that take up a lot of real estate, as we can see, anything that's a large, moderate caliber like a 9mm is going to be very reliable. And if we had to compare something like that 5-inch Smith & Wesson versus a 4-inch revolver that's going to take up the same real estate, I'm going to say that semi-automatic is a better choice if that's what you intend on carrying. But if you're intending on carrying something very concealable in your pocket, you know, simply saying the revolver is a bad choice because it has only 5 rounds or 6 rounds like my .327. Well, when that's very reliable and you're talking a 7-round auto that pretty much is going to jam on you, that's a big deal. And also power. A lot of people will talk about power and say, well, handguns are all ineffective compared to rifles. All handgun calibers are the same. Well, if that were the case, you mean to tell me that you're saying that a 22 short, which is a handgun caliber, and a 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum that is a handgun caliber is the same? No, we have statistical data that shows certain cartridges have a lot more quote-unquote stopping power, or as I like to call it, cartridge effectiveness. Is a full house .357 semi-jacketed soft point 125 grain moving at 1,500 feet per second, is that going to be more effective than a 9mm? Yes. Is a .44 Magnum with 800 foot-pounds energy going to be more effective than a 9mm or a .40? Yes. So when we talk about a lot of reliability in those 5 shots you need, a lot of stopping power in those shots that you need, if you take the time to be very accurate, there's some very good legitimate reasons why you would carry a revolver. So that's just my take on the whole thing. Is a revolver a legitimate thing? Absolutely. 100%, 110%. There's still some seriously good reasons why someone would carry a revolver. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.